Okay, so it's seat glue up time. I wanted to give a little bit of a disclaimer before we move forward. Originally, we wanted to stick with yellow pine. When Chris and I picked up this board from our local home center, it looked great. We didn't see any major cracks in it. However, once we got it back to the shop and the board started drying a little bit more, some of these cracks became a bit more apparent. With these cracks appearing, we were a little worried about the structural integrity of the board. So last minute, Chris went out and got us a Douglas fir board that is a little bit knotty here and there, but in general, I think we feel safer with the strength of this board. Okay, so I brought our board over here. We have it atop a couple saw benches, and we are going to cut down this board to seat width. We need two
24-inch.
Two 24-inch, yeah, thank you. Two 24-inch pieces. Bridget's marking it out. She's marking where we're gonna cut with the jigsaw. Let's do it.
Let's do it. All right, so we have 4 boards here. These 2 are for my chair and these 2 are for Kale's chair. And Kale measured halfway down the length of the board because if we just glued these 2 together, it would be way too wide. And we also need leftover material for our comb. So we are going to rip one of the boards in half at the bandsaw and save this half for our seat and this half for our comb. So let's do that right now. In focus, we both have our mics. Okay, all right, so we just ripped our 24-inch long board in half and we have our seat blank, our secondary seat blank, and then this is the material for the comb. And we've decided that this is gonna be our comb material because if you look at the factory edge, it's kind of messed up. And that's just gonna create a lot more work for us when we're block planing and trying to create this edge joint. So we're gonna take our nicer factory edge, put this guy to the side, and use this for our edge joint. And in our next step, we will tell you how we take this factory edge joint and make it a seamless edge joint with the block plate. Yeah. So, let's go.
Before we get to creating a seamless edge joint, we need to figure out how we want to orientate these boards together.
All right, so Kale and I decided that this side of the board is going to be facing up because if you look at the end grain, the rings are smiling at us, which means the heart side of the wood is facing up. And we're not going to get too into the wood movement reasons right now, but the short of it is that if the heart side is facing up, then it will pull the legs in tighter together. It'll pull the joints in tighter together over time. So it's just a bonus.
This is how we've decided how we want to orientate our boards. This is the face side of the boards. This is the side of the seat that you're going to sit on. So we don't lose this orientation, we're going to draw a carpenter's triangle. So that will always remind us which way these boards go, how we can get them back together, because they're not going to stay together once we start jointing these edges.
Okay, so we have our sandwiched together boards, and this is my poor man's vise setup using 4 bar clamps. So if you have a normal vise, feel free to use that for this step, but if you just have the 4 bar clamps, you can still create this really strong and sturdy work holding situation. So the first thing I did was clamp these 2 boards together, and then using my other 2 bar clamps, I clamped it at this end here and here. And you can use a kitchen table for this, you can use your work desk, any workable surface that you can find, and this creates an incredibly sturdy poor man's vise for you. So let's get into the actual edge joining. Hi, welcome to Dinkle at Home. This is the part of the show where I go over some things that I either didn't have the time or the forethought to cover in the initial filming. I'm here in my creepy basement and I want to talk a little bit about work holding. I showed how to make a makeshift vise with 4 bar clamps, and in the video I was like, okay, this is our poor man's vise. And the second I said that, I was like, ooh, I should not have said that. I could already hear people's eyes rolling when I call a makeshift vise made of 4 Bessie bar clamps, a poor man's vise, and rightfully so. But honestly, I was just trying to get through the take without flubbing up horribly. For context, the Bessie bar clamps, they're very nice clamps. And whilst our press is like a professional classroom/shop, you know they're gonna invest in an army of really nice bar clamps. But that's not the reality for most people. One 40-inch Bessie bar clamp, last time I checked, is $57. 4 of them, as I used in the video, is $228, which is an absolutely inaccessible price point. So I'm here to show you a work holding situation that is just as functional, but comes in at $26. So that's less than half the price of one single 40-inch Bessie bar clamp. This is gonna be for our edge jointing operation, and then it also works for the glue up. And if you do decide to go this route, it works for the whole chair. You don't need to buy bar clamps at any point in the process. I checked. So I recently went to the discount tool store/hardware store, and these are the numbers I got. So you're gonna need 2 ratchet straps, $4 each, and then 2 long F-style clamps. These are $9 each, which takes us to $26. And these ones I'm using here are about 2 feet long. I would recommend maybe getting a 36-inch one. The 36-inch one was $9. These are all things that I've had in my shop for like a million years, so they all look a little bit worse for wear, but we're gonna ignore that. All right, so let's start with work holding for the block planing operation. We have our triangle right here. I'm gonna take my smaller board, flip it, sandwich it up, put it on its end, and these are our 2 factory edges down here. That's what we want to be block planing. And I'm going to take my ratchet strap, so here is our ratchet strap contraption. So you want to make sure that these are as flush as possible before you start block planing, but it's looking pretty good to me, so let's go clamp it to something. Okay, so I'm really committing to the bit with the makeshift work holding. So this is just an inexpensive low table that we keep in our dining room, and if you really needed to, you could use something like this for your work holding. So I have my 2 boards right here, and I'm going to take the shorter ledge and prop it up on here. And then I'm going to take these clamps and secure it in place. Okay, and that is our work holding situation for block planing. It's incredibly secure. You're gonna move the table itself before you actually move the work piece. Okay, so if you are working off a random table in your house, chances are it's gonna be pretty flimsy. So what I did is I shoved this table into a random corner in my house, and that is gonna give me enough stability to actually work on this thing in any real capacity.
To ensure the tightest joint along this edge, we need to make sure that these edges are dead flat. And there are multiple ways you can go about this, but we're going to choose the block plane method. So the way that I like to go about finding the high and low spots is with a yardstick and a flashlight. We have a fancy flashlight here that's used for videography, but you don't need a fancy one. Just any at-home flashlight or even the flashlight on your phone. You need your work to be backlit. So when I get eye level with my work, I can tilt my yardstick and the light will shine through the low spots. The first step is locating the high points. So that's what we'll be doing first. So we have our flashlight behind our work, our yardstick ready. From this angle, it might seem like this edge is already pretty flat, but if I tilt the yardstick forward just a touch, you can see that light is starting to really shine through some of the low spots on this edge. First, I want to highlight the high spots. We're going to start by taking those down to make them level with the low spots. I'm going to locate the high spots by finding where the light isn't shining through. So you can see about right here, that's a really tight spot. To mark this high spot, I'm just going to scribble with my pencil here to remind myself of where this high spot is and look for any other high spots while I'm here. All right, I've marked my high spots on my first board. Now I'm going to do the same exact process on the second board.
All right, so I have my block plane here. If you just bought a block plane from the home center, you can use the factory edge. We can worry about sharpening later. Personally, I don't want to get into that right now. So let's get to knocking down these high spots. I'm going to take my plane here, and we want to keep the cut as thin as possible. So the knob here at the back of the tool, that's how you adjust the thickness of the cut. So I'm going to take my block plane, skew it, and start working on these high spots.
So the pencil marks have been planed down, aka the high spots. Now I want to plane the entire length of the edge of this board. So if you notice, I'm skewing my plane about 30 degrees. I don't want to go parallel to the board with my plane. I want the plane to be skewed so I'm kind of slicing through the wood. I'm also taking really light cuts here. Lighter is always better, especially when you're trying to get these two boards to match each other. It would be really easy to plane too much and then you have to match the other board to the first one and so on and you're chasing your own tail. Your cut should be no thicker than a sheet of computer paper. I'd say this is a pretty good thickness right here. As I'm planing, I'm making sure that my block plane is completely flush with the top of my boards. It could be really bad news if I accidentally start angling or tilting my block plane. So keeping it flush, keeping it level, and I'm overlapping my cuts just a little bit as I plane.
All right, so once you start getting full-length shavings as you're planing along the length of this, it's time to reevaluate. So we're going to do the same thing we did before. We're going to get our yardstick and our light. We're going to take a look at this lengthwise and across the grain.
So we're checking again with our yardstick to see if there are any high or low spots. As I'm tilting this, I can see some little points where the light is coming through, but these actually look great to me. Anything that's the thickness of a human hair is okay. That will be squeezed out when we clamp these two boards together during glue up. But now it's time to check this against the grain. So I'm using my combination square here, but not necessarily to check that our edge is square. I'm using it to check that these two edges are coplanar.
All right, so Kale just checked our boards this way and this way. It looked good, but if you do see some high spots, just do the same procedure that we did before. Mark them with a pencil, plane them until they disappear. But since our boards are looking really good with the yardstick, we're gonna take our block plane again and we're going to plane 30 degrees across the board. So we're gonna do overlapping strokes at 30 degrees, switch the other way, 30 degrees this way, and we're gonna do that until we produce shavings from all over both edges. And so when I'm doing this, I'm overlapping each stroke ever so slightly, kind of like mowing the lawn, and that just makes sure that nothing gets left behind and everything becomes coplanar.
All right, our final plane cut is going to be once again planing the entire length of our board, but this time we're not going to skew it. We're just going completely square to the board. And like before, it's important to overlap these cuts just a little bit, kind of like you're mowing a lawn, just so you don't leave anything left behind.
Okay, our boards are looking good with the yardstick and the combination square, and we are going to use our carpenter's triangle to put them back together, and we're going to do our dry fit to see if our edges are actually good. All right, so here is our edge joint to start. You can see it's not the best ever, but that's okay because the clamps are really going to take out a lot of those gaps. So Kale and I are going to get this thing clamped together and see if we can close all those gaps. And if we can, then it means it's time to glue up. Okay, so our dry fit went really well. All the gaps were clamped out during this dry clamping process. And just a note, with this edge to edge joint, you don't need any dowels or joinery to make this stronger. The edge joint itself and glue is plenty strong enough. And so now that we have confirmed that the dry fit is good, we can actually put glue on this and go to town. Are you ready?
I'm ready. All right, now that it's time for the real thing, we have some paper down to catch any glue spillage that happens once we tighten this edge up. We're just using good old PVA glue. I'll be using it from this bottle though. This is the same glue we just put in this bottle, so it's a little easier to squeeze. So I'm being really liberal with my glue here. Once I have enough glue on this edge, I'm just going to smear it out with my finger. You can use a brush or anything else that you're comfortable with. I just find this is the easiest way. We're gonna start with applying pressure to the center clamp first and then move our way out. How is yours
It's looking great. I'm getting an even squeeze out, which is a good sign.
All right, I need to squeeze a bit more on my end.
Use your
muscles. I can do it.
So I reset my ratchet straps so they are just about the size that needs to cover this panel glue up. That's just a good thing to do before you actually start putting glue on this piece. So yeah, that's just about there. All right, I'm gonna situate these a little bit ways in from either side, and I'm gonna do our dry fit test. And you know, if these two ratchet straps are strong enough to hold 2 kayaks to the roof of my car, then they're probably strong enough to close up a softwood edge joint. And when I was starting to think about this, I was intending to show you how to do some dowel joinery or whatever, biscuits, any type of thing to keep the layers from shifting, but I realized that you actually don't need to do that. This is a thick enough piece of board that it stabilizes against itself, and I don't really see shifting vertically being a problem. So that's nice, one less step. All right, and then for extra security, I'm gonna do 2 F-style clamps in the center. Wowie! All right, that is looking like a good edge joint to me. I have full confidence in this joint. No gaps anywhere, they all really closed out. And like I said before, if you do go this method of the 2 ratchet straps and the F-style clamps, this will carry you through the rest of the chair. These F-style clamps will work great for any of the clamping operations down the road in the video. This is our true poor man's work holding situation. But yeah, that's all I have to say on that. Back to Kentucky. Okay, so our Douglas fir seat is out of clamps. We let it sit in the clamps for 30 minutes, which is typical for PVA glue. But if you have really wet lumber, like that yellow pine back there, you want to leave it in clamps for a lot longer. So we're talking 4 hours or overnight. And our joint came together really nicely, but if you did have issues with your joint, there's some gaps, or you're worried about the structural integrity, you can get a steel mending plate from the hardware store or the home center, and you can bridge this across the parts of your joint that you're worried about. And there's no shame in doing this. It's going to be on the underside of your seat. It's more important that your seat stays together rather than be mending plate free. So just know that there's options if your joint didn't come out as good as you would have liked.